Hi, this is Julie, and this episode comes to you just after Mother's Day 2019, during a week that I'm leading a Mother's Quest Manifesto Challenge in the private Mother's Quest Facebook group. It's an invitation to claim or reclaim ourselves and our lives in motherhood, and to create what we're calling a 1-Minute Mom Manifesto to become a guiding light. If you haven't said yes to the challenge yet, it's not too late. In fact, the replays and prompts will live forever in the group. So whenever this conversation reaches you, you are welcome to come along. Visit www.mothersquest.com/community to join. Now, onto the show. Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to 2 high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self.
Mom!
I'll be right there. Where was I? In the months leading up to a big milestone birthday, I decided it was time to stop sidelining my dreams and realize that I'm the hero of my own journey. I knew I didn't want to do it alone, so I created this podcast to learn from other moms on their own quest, so their words of wisdom and lessons learned could help light the way for mine. I created this podcast for myself. Come along with me, and you'll find some treasures of your own. In honor of Mother's Day, I'm releasing episodes each week in the month of May that I think will help us pause from the busyness and prioritize and invest in ourselves. I found a powerful guide for this purpose in Elena Lipson, someone I met through another mentor and coach of mine, Lindsay Pera. Before I share more about Elena and what we explore in this conversation, I'm honored to introduce Lindsay with this episode's dedication.
Greetings, friends. This is Lindsay Pera, founder of the Mystic Society and Modern Mystics Institute, and it is my honor and privilege to be here with a celebration and gratitude of Elena Lipson, the Divine Self-Care Mentor, dear sister friend of mine and partner in the Simply Sacred Company. But so much more than that, I am a fan and in awe of Elena for the work that she does in the world. I am the daughter of a corporate success story, a woman who made her name in technology in the 70s, kind of a hidden figures sort of woman in that she stepped into engineering via a major in mathematics and had an incredible career at Hewlett Packard. But she worked hard and she worked long hours and she did the work for so many of us of clearing paths and of trailblazing. But she did it in some ways potentially at the expense of her own time, her own self-care, her own ability to put on her oxygen mask. Elena is on this planet helping women reclaim their self-care, their quiet moment, while not abdicating their sole purpose on the planet. She models for us and she teaches so many about how to have a yes and in life of showing up for the things that are most important as women and partners, as mothers, as sisters, but not doing that at the expense of our health or well-being. The last 5 years, I have been so grateful to journey by Elena's side, to learn from her wisdom and her modeling, to get to co-create with her and to bring support and teaching and coaching to women world changers. And I couldn't be more grateful to have been in connection with Julie and have the opportunity to share these words of celebration and gratitude for Elena for this Mother's Quest podcast. So much gratitude to Elena and Julie for all they do in the world. Could not be more grateful to be a part of this weaving. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lindsay, for this beautiful dedication to Elena. And thank you for sharing about your own trailblazing mother and what you learned from her about the importance of prioritizing ourselves in addition to the powerful work we do in the world. As a retreat leader, speaker, writer, coach, and podcaster, Elena inspires women to redefine the hustle in exchange for creating a life they love with what she calls the feminine metrics of success: pleasure, play, ease, grace, and trusting your own pace. In this conversation, we explore Elena's journey from a life that began in Russia to one based today in the fresh air of the Pacific Northwest, with her husband of over 19 years and their teenage son, Miles. The best adjective I could think of to describe this conversation is juicy, filled with so much goodness, insights, and examples for how to connect to our bodies, speak our desires, and lean into presence and inquiry instead of assumption, with ourselves, our children, and our partners. In fact, toward the end of the conversation, we begin to explore how we can keep the pilot light burning in our romantic relationships. So if you're listening with children around, you may want to put in some earbuds. I left this conversation recommitted to building presence in my life, with greater awareness of the importance of body, heart, gut, and brain alignment, and excited to explore Elena's challenge to us to get in touch with what we really want, and then to ask for it. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did, and that it sparks a shift in you, as it did me, to claim your self-care and speak your desires. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest. Elena, welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast for a special episode that I wanted to make sure comes out for Mother's Day. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here. This is an important conversation, and I just am excited to connect with you and your audience.
As always, you and I have been talking about having you on the podcast for a while. It's usually the case for me. And then I feel into when the right time is. And before we press record, you and I were both saying, it's perfect timing. And I feel like I really wanted to be in conversation with you because I have observed you through my connection with your partners in the Sacred CEOs. And Lindsay Pera is a mentor of mine. I've just observed how self-care is so central and such a part of your mission and who you are and how you live your life. And I would say for me, self-care sometimes falls to the bottom of the epic guidepost in terms of my priority list. And for so many people who I've had on the podcast who are living such exceptional lives and who are so thoughtful and intentional, self-care also still falls to the bottom for them. It's the thing they struggle the most with. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity to be in conversation and to learn from you about how you have made this such a central part of your life.
Thank you. Yeah, this is my jam. This is my jam. I can't wait to dive in.
We're going to start with a question that helps us all get to know you a little bit better. Tell me about your childhood and the impact that your own mother has had in shaping who you are today.
Yeah, I think my childhood had a huge part in shaping who I am, and my mom especially. I was actually born in Russia, and we moved here when I was between 5 and 6 years old, and moved to New York City and started school in a, place where I didn't know the language, and it just, my entire world. Now as a mom, I know how important that age is for framing your entire understanding of the world. So this is a time where I just had this really acute sense of, wow, there's a whole other world out there that I never knew about. And oh my gosh, there's a language out there that I never knew about. And I think that framework of feeling like there's all of these possibilities out there that I didn't know about and now I have access to, even though it's scary, it's also exciting, helped me to see possibility as I got older. And it always helped me to see more than a duality available in perspective. And I'm well known for being a reframer. Like, well, let's look at it from a different way. Let's try it. What if you were in this position? I love doing that. It's like, it was no doubt where I was going in becoming a writer and a speaker and a coach, because it's just how my mind got set up. And my mom was, something about the way she grew up gave her a sense of belief in myself and my sister. There's two of us. And she just had never told me I couldn't do something. Like, she just let me try new things. Like, dance class was made available for me. And she and my dad worked a lot. It was kind of like survival immigrant mode. We didn't come into America and all of a sudden that dream of like the golden, sidewalk kind of thing wasn't exactly there, but all things were possible. But that meant that my mom and my dad worked a lot. And my mom was just someone who, even to this day, she still just gets it done. She just never stops. She's always cooking, always helping, always caring for people, always giving. And when I was younger, I remember describing her as someone who is like the most generous, kind, loving person I know. And at some point, as I got into adulthood, I started seeing that as like intense self-sacrifice. And I think that informs my work to this day, because I would see her, go to work all day in the city. So after an hour commute each way, come home still in her work clothes, make food for the family. And I, as I got older, I was able to help, but just kind of got burned in my mind. She just worked all day, came home, did the food. She would clean one day a week. Like she did everything. She did require us, of course, to help, but she still was the person who did most things in the house. And so I see that, and I could see how much of herself she sacrificed. And of course, it was a time in our lives where like there just were no podcasts about self-care. Like it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't a conversation. It was just a different time. So I just spent so long watching her sacrifice herself for others. And I got the beauty of it. But now as an adult, as a mom, as a business owner and a wife, I could see how much I choose to not do because I could see how much of my energy would have been sacrificed and lost in who I, was giving away. So I could see the duality and the beauty in it, but it informs me for sure in who I am today.
Thank you for sharing that. It's been so interesting. I love this question as a starting point because so often our experience with our own mothers does set us on a path. And sometimes it's because we want to mirror or learn from the example of our mothers. And sometimes it is a counterpoint. So many people I've interviewed have had a similar experience. I mean, there's so much obviously that you learn from your mother that you also model so many great things. But, in this case, it does seem clear that there was something you observed that caused you to take a different perspective in how you wanted to show up in your life and your motherhood.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, of course, our mothers teach us so much just by being who they are. So on the good side, of course, I know not to go to someone's house empty-handed. I know how to have plenty of food on the table for guests. I know how to beauty way is something she modeled really well for me. So yeah, of course, you take both. And I think that's important to really be able to see both because it can help us to release some of that story around resentment, like, oh, I didn't get this, or, oh, because of this, I became whatever. So to me, it feels like it's an important aspect of claiming it and then having an empowered perspective around it.
I like that. I want to start to move into exploring your epic life. And I want to frame a little bit what I mean at Mother's Quest by epic. There are two parts of it, really. One is this idea that we are the author of our own stories, that we can claim our own epic journey to, the heroine's journey, and really live the life that's filled with the things that matter most to us. So I want to start there with your epic life journey. Tell me what you feel like you've been on a quest for in your life and what has brought you to where you are now.
I have a relationship with the word quest, like the word journey. I've been reframing it a little bit for myself, but I feel like I was one of those kids who was just always drawn to the stage. Like I was a born entertainer. My family would have me, tell jokes, or I would be choreographing dances. And I was always drawn to the relationship between what I do and how people react to me. And so that really informed a lot of growing up. But I think that's how I defined epic for a long time, is being seen, getting applause, getting validation. Like, if I created something, it had to be seen and witnessed, and it had to be, I guess, the applause. Like, I did this, look at me kind of thing. And now I actually define it really differently. I have this sense of the epicness of moment by moment living. And the more I can live in this very moment and speak my truth and be aligned with what I desire and what I choose and be able to be honest with myself around it, to me, that feels like I'm actually living an epic life. And that alignment piece is so important. I know I teach self-care. Self-care is sort of what people know me for, but that's just the door you step through. When you hang out with me long enough, what I'm really helping you to do is to claim your voice and to speak your desires in those moments where you're about to not say what you really mean, to actually choose differently. And so the more I redefine for myself what it means to be living an epic life, for me, it's being honest with myself with what I really want and not downplaying it and not talking myself out of it and not hiding for fear of the outcome or what other people think. Like, to me, that is what living an epic life means now. I mean, I am a speaker, so I'm on stage and I still lead retreats. I love that interaction with people, but I don't do it now for the applause. I do it now because I see the power of connection and transformation and movement and all the things I talk about. So if I can share some of that, and if I can activate someone to really trust themselves and to speak up in those moments, those little moments, then to me, I'm living an epic life now versus someday, because to me, that feels like an excuse for not doing it now, even in the small ways.
And so you said that you've had a reframe with the words quest and journey. Mm-hmm. And is that what it's about? You know, making it more about where you are and your journey now as opposed to the destination?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What caused the reframe or perspective shift for you? Was there a particular moment or experience that set you on a new frame?
The journey of motherhood, for sure, because I found myself having what I used to call rubber band moments, where you're in the moment, but all of a sudden you're either rubber banding into the past, like regretting something that you did or didn't do, or you're rubber banding into the future and you're starting to have either a fear play out or like starting to see where my son would end up because of what he's doing right now, whether it was positive or negative. But what I started realizing was I'm actually cutting off the possibility by doing that. And yes, there's some beauty in planning. And yes, there's beauty in dreaming into the future. But I found myself literally like just at the very basic definition, missing the moment. And so I would try to catch myself doing that, both in my business as a mother and as a wife. Like something would happen, you'd get triggered by a situation, and all of a sudden you're starting to create a story into the future. To me, it feels like when I look back on the most epic things that have happened to me, the miraculous opportunities, the golden doors, they never happened because I was calculating them into the future. They happened because I was so present and so lit up by what I was doing that a new possibility opened up. And the more I could be present with my son, the more I could listen. Like, you know, when you're having a conversation with your kid, especially as they get older, and they say something and all of a sudden it's an opportunity to teach, especially as a coach, like, ow, I've got the perfect lesson here. And I could just see his face if I was present enough to shut down. Like, oh, there goes mom again. And now I find myself sometimes getting into that. And he says, I could see that face. I'm like, what are you thinking right now? He's like, I feel like I've heard this before. I'm like, oh, right. Right. So I just take a deep breath. I'm like, okay, so just either change the topic or just, what do you think about that? You know, I find myself more and more as I'm on my spiritual journey and my personal evolution journey, like trying to release the future as much as possible. Because in the moments that I was so present and so like in inquiry instead of assumption, that's when the phone call would arrive and invited me to this thing that I've been dreaming of, or, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even have had that conversation if I wasn't present, or I'm just not going to even think about what tonight is going to mean. I'm just going to show up. And the more I've done that and the more I can be present and honest, the more it feels like the golden opportunities just arrive. And that's not even why I'm doing it, but I think the more I can release my expectations and just be fully present, that's been my prayer for years now. Like, please just let me be present for this conversation. Let me just see what this moment needs. Let me just trust that I know what to say, what to do, and who to be in this moment. And from that, I feel like we can really activate other people to see someone in their presence to do the same.
I love so many things about this. And I feel like I've been circling around this lesson for myself again and again. I just shared on Instagram a couple of weeks ago this quote that said, tomorrow never comes. Mm-hmm. It is always today. Mm-hmm. When you actually think about that you're only ever living in the present, it's one of those kind of mind-blowing concepts to really get your hands around.
Right. It's so true. It's a good one. It's my daily prayer. Please let me be present for the magic of the moment.
And I love the ways that you're bringing that into parenting. That's a good transition into digging into each of the epic guideposts. So I first said that epic means the larger frame about the life that we're living and our journey. And I love that you root yours in being very present and in inquiry instead of assumption. EPIC for me also is an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us to live a fulfilled, amazing life, especially in the years when we're raising our children. And each guidepost stands for a different thing that I felt like I always was and still am on a quest for. And the first one, E, stands for engaged. And it's about being engaged mindfully with our children. You've already started to share some of the ways in which you've been able to do that. What other key lessons have you learned about how to be engaged with your son?
Oh, so many. Isn't it just the whole thing? So I'll give a specific example. So we moved to where we live now in Bellingham, Washington, to be near the school that we thought he would be just a great fit for, which is the Waldorf school. And he started in mommy and me classes, and it was great and wonderful. It's a really like outdoor nature-based learning, lots of stories, lots of music. And it worked really well until he was in 5th grade. And then it just didn't work anymore. And it actually hadn't been working for a while. And we were thinking about other schools, and we ended up homeschooling him, which was never on my radar. It just was not something that I wanted to do. I'm a business owner. I travel. I need my time, my me time and my work time and my husband time and my friend time. I was very committed to those things. And as we started exploring it, I just got this real constant messaging about let the universe guide, let him guide, him being my son, like let his desire guide it. And in order to do that, like I was saying earlier, I had to release my expectations of what the future was going to look like, because I already had it all set in my mind on what the graduation was going to look like and all these things that like the markers, the milestones that I had to let go of. And it really caused a lot of tension in my body and in my being, because I felt a lot of fear around, I don't want to be a teacher. I'm not his teacher. I'm his mother. I had to work through a lot of it with my husband, of course, who committed to the journey as well. I would say now we're just wrapping up our 2nd year of homeschooling, and he's probably going to go back to school next year. But what it taught me so deeply was to trust what he needs, to trust that everything that we want for him is going to be just fine. It doesn't have to mean anything about the future. Like I had to let go of so much. And what I learned was through this time where he's an adolescent, like during this time where I hear so many moms and dads complaining about their 12 and 13-year-old in different situations, I got to have an intimacy with him on a daily basis that really was so powerful. And he's, he got the math, like he got the stuff. That wasn't a big deal. That was actually the easiest part. The biggest part of it was to be with him in each day, was to trust that we were going to figure it out as we went and that we could have these conversations together. And so learning to, again, it'll keep coming back to this very base lesson, which is being present, allowing for the inquiry of what do we need most here? How can we keep trusting in the unfolding of being together? And just being okay with whatever it looked like, because for me, I had to recondition my societal expectation of what school was going to look like and to reframe it with what our family needed and how our family was going to make it look. It wasn't going to be like a 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. classroom environment. It was going to be very different. And it was. It included travel and included fishing as his passion. He loves to play the guitar. He's like, we're outside all the time. My husband does most of this like school learning with him. I do language with we just figured it out. And it was fine. Like, it's totally fine. Did he get everything that the other kids got in class? No, but he got other things. And it just reminded me again of one of my values is creating a life on my terms. And this was just another example of allowing it to unfold and having the conversations with him about me time and his time and physical, all the things that we were talking about that we wouldn't have gotten a chance to really dive into on a deeper level if he was gone in school all day. Now that time is coming again. I'm going to miss him for sure. But I feel like we created this little bubble of intimate connection that we wouldn't have had, trusting that it happened for a good reason. And he's our only child. And we just really got this cool little bubble of time with him still happening. So I still enjoy it, but it's going to change and I'm going to have to trust that transition too. So I guess coming around full circle, it was really a combination of trusting that our children do know what they need. And we can also release some of our own expectation to be able to trust that. That doesn't always apply. There's times where we remind them that, okay, here's a situation you might not want to step into, but are you going to regret it? Here's what regret might feel like in your body. How are you going to feel after this thing that you don't want to do? Are you going to be proud of yourself? Like, we can teach them resiliency. We can teach them that inner fortitude. And with that, we can also really listen to them and trust that sometimes they do know better what they need versus us. And sometimes they just don't have the experience to know. So we have to really be in that present moment to be able to trust that.
Amazing. As you just brought this up, I'm wondering if you could shed some light on something that is a challenge for my son. He really struggles with feeling regret. And when there are moments when he has to make a decision, he can almost get gripped with panic about the possibility of having to feel regret. And I'm wondering, what you've learned, or if you have any words of wisdom about helping him learn to be resilient through that feeling.
Yeah, that's such a good question. My son has a little bit of that too, where he actually will verbalize. He's very, very verbal. He started talking when he was 9 months old. And he's an external thinker, which is a gift.
I've got that one too.
And I love it because I can hear it. As he's getting older, it's definitely pulling back a little bit. I try to be quiet as much as possible so I can hear it. But he will say things like, oh, I hate having to make this choice. I don't want to choose one, or I don't want to have to, decide which one to do. When he was younger, and this was I'm thinking about piano, he's a really gifted musician, has started with piano and now he plays electric guitar. But when he had to go and do a little recital, and they weren't big, massive recitals, just the families of all her students. And when he got old enough and he got a little bit of fear of performance, he would say, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go. I'm so last time you went afterwards, how did you feel? Helping him reconnect the dots a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then he's okay, so I know beforehand I'm going to feel like this because I pointed it out to him. How did you feel before? I felt scared. I felt I didn't want to do it. But then while you were doing it, how did it feel? It was fun. Okay, well, how did you feel afterwards? Oh, I'm glad it was over. Okay, good. But did you, was it good that you did it? Yes. But then as he kept getting older, that simplistic conversation felt a little bit too simple. Right now he decided to stop taking guitar lessons. And it's for the longest time we had these conversations about regret. And he's I'm not going to regret this. I felt like I was putting it on him. I was telling him he was going to regret it, but it was more of my story. My regret for not continuing dance lessons, my regret for not pursuing a path, right? So I think we have to be very mindful of not giving them regret where it doesn't belong, because they know. He's I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm okay, great. Well, if you ever do, we'll just start it again. He's okay, great. And it was just done. But it took a long time to get there because I realized I was layering my regret of stopping dance lessons on him and feeling one day he's going to look back and wait a minute, that's me. I didn't have anyone to have this conversation with me. He does. And he's clear. And so I'm going to have to let go of him having this fictitious regret that's more my regret than his. I can teach him. I can share my story. And if he connects with it, then he connects with it. But if he's no, that's not me, I just don't want to do it, then that's something I have to be okay with and just say okay, great. In the future, you can always start over again, because I think this is part of that social story of if you don't start when you're younger, you'll never be an expert. If you don't keep going, you'll be someone who quits. Sometimes it's okay to quit. And there is no limitation anymore. He's teaching himself right now the most incredible, complicated guitar riffs on YouTube. And he's just teaching himself. And that is the new generation. They can put on YouTube video and learn. They don't have to spend, they could if they want to, of course. He also takes jujitsu, which is twice a week, 2 hours each time. It's a very physical thing. You have to develop. He understands that he's going to build strength over time. But with other things, I just think we have to reevaluate the stories we have around it and be okay with them quitting if they need to, but also to understand that we can help them see things in a new way. There's two stories there. One is our story about them having regret, and one is their own story about trusting that they're ready to let something go, and it's okay to do that.
Yes, I love it. There's so many things I want to pull out from it. And also a reflection of my own positive parenting moment. I'll just share the one that's immediately coming to mind in case this is going to really help somebody listening. My son is a freshman and for his whole life had wanted to be on the high school basketball team. He's been playing basketball since he's very young. And the moment he got on the team this year, all of a sudden he was in a panic, very much concerned about oh, I have to be the best. I'm not playing the way I think I should be playing. I'm in my head. I'm overthinking every move and wasn't sure he wanted to continue. So like all of a sudden he got everything I always wanted and then he wasn't sure. And we ended up going for a walk. And on that walk, I ended up saying to him, Ryan, you know what? It's really okay. If you don't want to do this, you can say no. And maybe you'll decide that you want to play next year. And I think he really needed to hear that because as soon as I released my own expectation about it, of course, I've been like driving him to basketball practice half an hour every day. I mean, there was certainly like some internal feelings about, really? After all this work, you might want to not do this. But I had to get to that place about like, this really isn't about me and allow him to get in touch with how he really felt himself. And the minute I did that, he got really clear. He was like, no, you know what? I'm not ready to say no to this. And then he ended up having an amazing season with, of course, ups and downs. He got voted MVP. It ended up being such a powerful journey, but it could have also been powerful if he had decided no. But it was really his decision. But I can totally see how I needed to both remove myself and my own expectations from it and also help him get more in touch with how he was feeling, what he really wanted.
I love that. And I think you said something really, really important was you went for a walk.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't have to sit with a spreadsheet and calculate the rights and wrongs and the positives and the negatives because they're always there. But it's almost like you let him lead with his body and lead with movement and being an inner compass motivated person because once you walk, he wasn't stuck anymore. And I think that's really important to reflect on because we are so in our heads as adults. And the more we can move into our bodies and to trust that we can listen to ourselves, like you gave him space.
Yeah.
And you released him from your own expectations. It's such a gift. I totally see that and honor that with you.
Well, I want to now jump into the next guidepost P, which stands for passionate and purposeful. And this is about the impact that you make in the world beyond your family. It seems like embodiment, being in our body and moving is already a theme you've shared a couple times. How much is that core to what you do? And tell me a little bit about how you think about like why you're here and the impact you're hoping to have.
Yeah, I actually connected with the way Elizabeth Gilbert described it. I think she talked about it in her book, Big Magic, I think. But she talked about having done a speech, like a talk on passion and how important it is for you to have a passion and, live this passion and give everything to it, like the way she does with her writing. And then someone connected with her afterwards and they're like, oh my God, I don't have anything like that. Am I just like wasting my life? Basically, on the other side of that, she realized that actually, she was looking at it in a different way, in a wrong way, meaning not everyone knows that they have a passion like music or dance or writing or cooking or crocheting or whatever it is. It could just be about living in a certain way. And that's a philosophy that it sort of crystallized what I had been feeling, which is it's not so much about wrapping your entire life around one passion or two passions. Like people call themselves multi-passionate. And that's great if you have one. What I realize more and more is if I can live passionately, if I can be in whatever I'm doing, it starts to ripple out into everything I'm doing. So even though, because I think as entrepreneurs especially, or as moms, we start to like connect everything to being a mom or connect everything to, does this have a return on investment in my entrepreneurial life or in my work? And not everything does, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't serve you in a really powerful way. So for me, I feel most alive when I am dancing. I feel most alive when I'm near water. I could just be sitting by the water. I don't even have to be in it. I could just be near it. I feel most alive when I am around a dinner table with family and friends serving food. Like none of those things have a direct impact on my revenue, but they make me a whole person, a person who lives with joy and celebration and gratitude and passion for what I desire. So when I'm dancing in my Zumba class, and sweating, it's not a direct return on investment to my webinar that I'm hosting tomorrow, but it makes me feel alive. And I show up as someone who's honoring all parts of myself. So to me, it's not so much about, I have to figure out my passion and live it. Like, I don't know that everyone has that thing, but I don't think you're going to discover it mentally. I don't think you're going to discover it intellectually. I think you're going to have to release all of the things that were ingrained in you as a kid and try to rewrite some of those stories, but also just notice when you are feeling that aliveness and do more of that. Because I think that, again, much like what I was talking about in the beginning, that deep sense of presence is going to open up doors that you never even saw coming.
Yeah, I have a strong connection with Elizabeth Gilbert too. A visit to a writing workshop that she did planted the seeds for everything that followed with Mother's Quest. I'll share some of that with you and I'll link to it in the show note. And I think I've seen that conversation you're referring to, and I'll find it so we can link to that, where she stopped talking about passion so much because so many people had trouble connecting to that. And she started talking more about curiosity, which is also what you're so rooted in. Tell me, in your work today, what are the ways in which this lives and how you help other people?
Yeah. So for me, for sure, I have a daily inquiry of how do I want to feel today? What am I going to do to feel the way I want to feel today? For me, as I mentioned, Zumba. So I was a dancer. As I mentioned, like I did not pursue dancing past my teen years because we moved away from my dance studio and every excuse in the book, I didn't do it. So I do have this sense of like, oh, I could have been a dancer. And then I realized, wait a minute, all I really want to do is dance. So how could I do that? Well, first of all, I was hosting a retreat with a woman for 3 years, and she was a dancer, a lifetime dancer. And I got to dance for hours a day at this retreat while I was teaching self-care and she was teaching movement. And that really awoke something in me. I'm like, actually, I want to do this every day. And so on the drive back from the retreat, she said, why don't you try Zumba? It's really fun. And that was literally like the moment, like, really, Zumba? Isn't that aerobics thing? She's like, no, you're going to love it. And that was about 3 years ago. And so I've been doing Zumba several times a week ever since. And it's become this like inner compass awakening thing where I just let go of the external world. I dance, I sweat, I feel sexy, I feel alive. And so that is something that I crave and desire and really informs me as being awake to my own energy. And so when I teach women, when I have a year-long program on self-care, which tells you that it's not just self-care, it's a lot of pieces involving self-care. There's a whole wheel involved in it, from sexuality to relationships to your relationship to time, to your relationship to morning practice. It's a lot. But when I have like a client in front of me or I'm hosting a group call, I will always guide you back to your body. I will ask you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and feel your words in your body, because you do have all that you know. Your body is a portal to your inner intelligence, to your desires, even intellectual knowing. Your head brain is just one of 3 brains. You also have a heart brain and a gut brain, and they all have to be connected and clear in order for you to feel fully aligned. That's what alignment is. People are like, well, how do you know when you're aligned? It's when your mind, your heart, and your gut are all saying the same thing. And you won't know that unless you spend time in your body. So when I reverse engineered how to help people do that, it's why I start everything I do is teaching women how to do their morning practice. I call it the magic morning practice because it helps you align your head, your heart, and your gut with what you want to do in all areas of your life. So that's how it shows up for me, is like your body is your navigational compass. And if you don't spend time in it, then you're going to constantly be making decisions from external sources and external pressures. And that is a life lived for other people, by other people, by their desires for you. And then you wake up one day and you're like, wait a minute, whose life is this? Like, I didn't sign up for this. Yeah. You did, but you did it sort of by default. And I don't want you to live by default. I want you to live in the moment, right? In the presence. So, yeah.
So what would you say is the biggest thing or ways of being that you hope the clients who work with you or go through the year-long journey with you take away with them?
Yeah. So the first thing is understanding that we are not here to change anyone else. We are not here to live a life for anyone else. We're not here to tell anyone else what to do. We are here to evolve ourselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Like if you keep that as a daily mantra, I am devoted to the evolution of my being. And you know that when you are starting to put any blame on anyone else, it's time to come back actually and to claim your role in every situation and every relationship. And this can really feel heavy at first. It can feel like, well, why would I do that? Like, I would never create this situation. Why would I do that? And it's not so much about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming your role and your power and your ability to change the situation around you by starting to acknowledge your own desires what do I want? And am I willing to claim that I can have what I want and that I can ask for what I want and that I can be honest with the people around me about what I need, whether it's 10 minutes alone or I need somebody else to do the dishes for me. Like, it's that simple. So I think it's about really coming back to the simple practices of being still with yourself. I think so many women, I've worked with women for years now, and I started coaching about 20 years ago. And I think that one of the first indications that it's time to really go within is when you ask somebody what they want, you kind of get this radio silent.
Yeah.
Or you get a repetition of what everyone else wants. I want money. I want this house. I want this car. Okay, yeah, those are great. But what do you want? Why do you want these? What is it going to give you? So I think it all starts from coming back to the most simple act, the most simple inquiries of your own inner world.
So much of this resonates. Last week, one of my very first clients and I co-created a workshop in a corporate setting. And we brought the epic guideposts to parents of children on the spectrum and other people that were in like intense caregiving roles within this corporation. And when we walked through the epic life wheel and had them like do some reflection and assessment, the next guidepost, which I'm going to ask you about, invested in ourselves. And that's where like all the self-care and like bringing joy and like the things that you really want that feed who you are in your life. It was really not only challenging for them, but like even the question itself, somebody raised their hand and said, I just need to say, when was the last time I ever asked myself, what do I want? Mm-hmm. It was so foreign to them to even be in that space. So I want to move into this guidepost now, invested in yourself, and ask you, what are the biggest ways in which you've learned to invest in yourself and get in touch with your desires?
Yeah, I used to approach it sort of from a big brushstroke kind of thing. When I started as a coach, I was trained in the clean sweep, and it had these 100 questions. It was so overwhelming. And as a coach, we had to do it first to ourselves. And so it had all these questions about financial life and home life and relationships. It was really thorough and really, really good. I'll say it gives you a lot of insight into yourself, which is great. But I realized after doing it, I'm like, okay, great. Well, now you have all this knowledge. What do you do with it? You haven't changed anything. You've just built awareness, which is great. But I really have come to understand over these last 2 decades of mothering and coaching and building several businesses and moving across state and marriage and all that and it entails over a long-term relationship, is that you can know everything in the world. We have access to the best books in the world, the best online content in the world. We can literally at our fingertips have a world-class education. But we don't do the things we know we're supposed to do because we have these subconscious stories that are habits, because we don't understand the basics of how we're wired. So to me, that's been one of my learning inquiries over the last probably 5-6 years is, how come whenever I do this, I think this? How come whenever something amazing happens, I'm telling myself 10 reasons why it's not going to work? Why am I going through this cycle of feeling amazing and then feeling crappy and then feeling amazing? Why am I doing that? Like, I know what I need to do. Why am I still eating the croissant when I know I should be eating the apple? Like, why am I doing this to myself? Am I really so bad to myself? And I think in learning about habitual patterns and learning where it all starts is why I'm so passionate about helping people with the micro self-care awarenesses and about rewiring how we are stepping into our day. So I think if we can start even listening to our own inner landscape and investing time in being with our own thoughts is where it starts. So I think what that person said to you in that workshop is probably life-changing. When that person had an awareness of saying, wow, I have never even asked myself that question, it opened up a new synapse in this person's brain to say, well, what if I did ask myself this question? And then it starts a new thought pattern. So for me, I keep it super, super simple, where I have anyone that I work with, this is the thing that I give away for free. And like, I want everyone on earth to have a magic morning practice. I'm writing a book about it. Like, I want everyone to have it, is to start your day with an acknowledgement of what you're thinking and then what you're feeling. And then to understand that through the acknowledgement and then moving your body, you can actually start to shift your thoughts. There's so many people who do beautiful embodiment work, and I count myself in that sort of, zone of trusting that you can rewire your thoughts and you can start to make new connections. And once you have that tool, I feel like everything opens up. But it's not easy, meaning your habits take time to change. So, when I do work with people, I start with a day and then reflect, start with 5 days and then reflect, start with, wherever you are right now is perfect. Start where you are and then start investing time in being with yourself. I'll just go back to the basics of self-care. When people hear self-care, we've been so trained to think of manicures and massages and, that kind of thing, which is really important. But I don't think that serves us, because if you have a manicure and your nails look beautiful and you feel good for a few minutes, but then you walk out the door thinking like, oh, my life, like you're still not tapping into the bigger picture, which is, I am getting this manicure because I am worthy of investing time in myself. I have so much gratitude for this experience. I'm really going to let myself sink in and enjoy it and really allow myself to be revitalized and refreshed so I can walk back into my life and give to others. That's a different experience than saying, wow, my nails look really good. I took time and I checked off that box on the list of self-care. So it's how you're doing the thing you're doing.
So as I'm hearing you talk about this, I can't help but think about like some of my own habits. I'm wondering if you could maybe take one of the things I'm working on in my own self-care and help me figure out how I would incorporate what you're teaching and bring it to my own morning practice. I have a morning practice too, so I'm excited to add some of these elements to it. So one of the things I struggle with is getting enough sleep. I am a total night owl. I love being up at night when everyone else is sleeping. The time can kind of escape me, so I may not be as intentional with the time that I have. And I will, despite my best intentions, find myself, I'll say earlier in the evening, I'm really going to get to it earlier tonight. And then before I know it, I look at my watch and it's 1 or 1:30. And I think, how did I get to this place again? And instead of feeling good about it, like, well, but I enjoy this time so much, I'll go into that negative self-talk about like, how do I keep doing this to myself? What would be some of your guidance about how to begin to shift that?
So I can relate to that because I love the nighttime. There's something about it that makes me feel really naughty that I'm awake. So there's some positives around that. And there was some sort of self-sabotaging behaviors around that before I started practicing my magic morning. I realized that the more I had around fear or things I was nervous about, the more I wanted to just sort of like stay in my little bubble and numb out with watching something silly or eating something crunchy or ice cream or whatever. And I realized a couple of things were happening. One is I needed that time. I actually needed the time of like a bubble of space where I could just do what I wanted to do. For me, it became like this sort of 16-year-old with her arms crossed. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I don't care what anyone says. I think a couple of things. I'm kind of counterintuitive on this advice. One is give yourself permission to do that, like maybe once a week or twice a week. And like, you know what? I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to do what I want to do. Like, what do I want to do? Without making it so grown up intentionally. Like, don't make it so much about getting something done. Just make it about, if I had this night to myself, would I take a bath? Would I watch my favorite Netflix show? Would I just sit and eat some ice cream because I love it? Like, what would I do? What would I do just to make myself happy and make it fun and make it naughty? What was the feeling behind it? That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is sometimes when I find myself getting into that, because like I said, it's a habit. It is a habit, pure and simple, that you have gotten into. And so sometimes it just takes a little bit of awareness, maybe having a little Post-it note. What I do when I teach my clients is to have little alarms on their Google Calendar. I have several in the morning with really like good mantras and questions that I ask myself, or like something that's like a mantra that says, everything that is mine by divine right comes to me in perfect order today. That's something that pops up every morning at 8 a.m. And then at 11:45 a.m., I have a little mantra that comes up that says, what's the most nourishing thing I can do for myself right now? Because the tendency could be to skip lunch. I'm like, actually, I've been sitting probably for 3 hours now. Now I want to get up and maybe take a walk or maybe go walk my dog or go make, lunch, something like that. I've had these prompts in my schedule for years now so that my body expects it. It's a habit. And so what you can do is around 9 or 10 p.m., you can have a prompt that pops up and says, what's the most nourishing thing you can do for yourself right now? And you can have a conscious conversation. Actually, I think going into bed and reading a good book would be good right now. Or actually, what feels nourishing right now is that bowl of ice cream. Like, at least have some consciousness around it. But if you give yourself permission to do it on purpose, maybe it's once every 2 weeks, whatever feels good for you. The third thing I want to say is, like, for me, I know my human design is manifesting generator. I know my body needs to move during the day. If I haven't moved enough during the day, like maybe dance, gone for a walk or a run, if I haven't been in my body enough, my mind is still going on overtime and I don't feel tired. I've committed to some form of movement that gets my heart rate up. And so by the end of the day, I'm actually physically tired versus just in my head all day, which actually, I don't know, gives you like a new sense of energy, like a third wind at the end of the night. A lot of women tend to get that because your body just hasn't moved enough. I don't know what your exercise schedule is, but along with that, and this is where meditation is so important, is that one of the benefits of meditation is that it actually nourishes your pineal gland. And your pineal gland is what moderates your melatonin and your serotonin and controls your sleep cycles and rhythms. So if you're not spending time during the day at some point, and I like the morning, but there's also something to be said about nighttime meditation, is activating that part of your system, physiology that actually balances out your sleep cycles. That's a really important thing that people don't talk about. They just think it's that woo-woo, like hippie meditation thing, but it's actually very, very important for our circadian rhythm to have a pineal gland that is activating our hormone called melatonin, which is a hormone that helps us to understand when to sleep.
So interesting. Yeah. No one has ever explained that impact of meditation. I love everything you shared. I've been using reminders on my phone, but the idea of attaching a question or a mantra to it, that's really powerful. I'm going to definitely play with that. And there's just, so many amazing things I could pull from what you shared, and I could talk to you for hours. But I know we're getting close to the end of our time. So I want to ask you about the last guidepost, C, which is connected to a strong support network. And this is about all of the relationships in our lives and the community so that we don't have to be alone on our journey. I have a particularly selfishly motivated question for you on this one, because I was sharing with you before we pressed record that I've been married happily for a very long time, but I'm also at a point in my life where I'm in menopause a little bit earlier than most people would be. And my desire for intimacy and connection to my sexuality is not what it used to be. I had a guest on the podcast, Julie Lithcott-Hames, who made me promise to start to talk about menopause and these issues more often. So I'm going to be bringing it up with a lot of my guests. And I know there's a lot to learn from you in the area of desire and intimacy. So could you share a little bit on this epic guidepost C, what you've learned about that connection with your partner and how to kind of like fan the flames of that a little bit?
Oh, yes. First of all, we're going to need an entire other hour for this. Funny enough, this is the month of sexuality and self-care in my Divine Self-Care Circle membership. And we just had an amazing guest on who talked about the connection between hormones, money, and sexuality. It was fascinating. I love this question. I think first and foremost, we've been married for almost 17 and together for 19. And so it's been an epic journey of evolution for sure. The people we are now are not the people we were then. And I think for me, the biggest piece of it has been several things. One is back to redefining my relationship with my body and understanding that I am changing and we're going to keep changing. And if I get stuck in having to look a certain way or be a certain way, I'm going to be stuck in the past, right? So this is how we started the conversation. If I can continue to honor my body where I am now and to understand that the more I do things like dance, the more I do things like, movement and yoga, things that make me feel good in my body, the more I'm excited about being naked in front of my partner, the more likely we are to stay playful and connected. It's one of my intentions on my vision board is to feel love and connection and have a playful sexual connection with my husband. An actual intention that I have. It's not in the back closet somewhere as an afterthought. It is part of the wheel of my life is having a sexual, intimate connection. And with that, I'll say it's very important to redefine intimacy for yourself. The things that worked for you 20 years ago or 10 years ago or even 3 years ago might not work anymore because you're evolving as a person. And so maybe you're in a place in your life as a woman, and I'm speaking for myself and all the women. And I tell my husband this all the time, like women are not a light switch. Men are more of a light switch when it comes to sexuality. You can literally say it's time and off you go. Most men. For women, we're more like a pilot light that always needs to be kept burning. We need to be not so much like, okay, romance. Maybe romance is not a word anyone connects with, or maybe you do or don't, but it's more like, well, what is it to keep my pilot light going? What I need to have time to just talk and walk. For me, that's a big thing. We like to talk and walk. We go for a walk, whatever comes up, we talk. We like to have time to just sit on the couch and be together. I don't want to, 10:30 at night, I'm ready to go to bed and he's ready to have a whole night. That's not going to work because it's literally, we're not scheduling the right connection. So I like daytime intimacy. I like to be laughing together. So we make sure we watch funny shows together, we joke around together. So redefining in order to get to the bedroom, if that's where you choose to connect, there are a lot of checkpoints that we need to define for ourselves in order to feel like we actually even want to go there. And I think so many people let what happens in the bedroom skew their connection during the day, where I think it's backwards. I think we need to define for ourselves what makes you feel connected to someone. Is it sitting and reading a book together? Is it going out for a nice dinner together? Is it making pancakes together? Is it playing Scrabble? In fact, I have an episode on my podcast called Scrabble as Foreplay, because for me, sitting across the table from my husband, getting competitive, just there's something about it. It's just so fun and playful. And I get this like fiery side of myself that comes out once the game is over, especially if I win, forget it. I'm just like, that's it, let's go, But who would have thought Scrabble would turn me on, right? So I think it's important to stay, again, back to inquiry, back to trusting and listening, and stop reading the magazines. Like they don't know, they just come back to yourself. Think about a time that you really felt, laughter, play, outdoors, like those things, those calm, peaceful connections will stoke the fire of that intimate connection. And women have a relationship with orgasm that changes over time. So if we can learn more about what we need and want and allow ourselves the permission to really take time to get to orgasm, to get to pleasure, we have permission to do that. Like again, for men, every single time, it's like clockwork, right? Usually, unless there's something else going on. For women, it's a different story. But if we can be honest about it, and not just say, oh, we'll just do it later by ourselves. What if we just gave ourselves permission to take as much time as we needed, and our men were invited into that too? So again, this is a whole other conversation.
Yes, we could have a whole episode on this.
I love this topic. So anytime you want to talk more about it, I'm totally in.
Before we move on, I appreciate the be in the inquiry, take the same invitation that has been cutting across all the guideposts to this question and think about, what do you need to feel that connection? I like the metaphor of the pilot light. It's actually really fitting. I think what has been really hard is what happens if you literally feel like your pilot light is off?
Yeah, I think it's okay. There are going to be times where it's off. And I think we can turn to other parts of our body to just find pleasure in food, pleasure in nature, pleasure in hand holding. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. Of course, there's the physical health checks that you can do with your physicians and make sure that all of your vitamins are in check and your nutrients are in check. It's a cycle. So just permission granted to know that you're not broken. It will come back if you have a relationship with your own pleasure. That's as succinct as I can be. Yeah. There's so much more.
Do you have a few resources? I know this is something you talk about and share a lot. Are there a couple particular podcast episodes or posts or things that you've written on this subject that would be useful to link to this conversation?
Yes, I've got a couple of podcast episodes that talk more about this. It's episode 8 and 67. Number 8 is called Prioritize Your Pleasure. And episode 67 is Pleasure is Your Birthright and the G-Spot is a Myth.
Those sound really juicy. I can't wait to listen.
Oh, good.
Well, we are at the end of our conversation. This is a time, though, where you can give me a challenge and anyone else listening can say yes to that challenge as well, building on the themes that we've been discussing today.
I would say, the biggest invitation and challenge is to see how much presence you can bring to whatever you're doing. So whether it's having a conversation, whether it's meditating, whether it's writing, whether it's being in nature, to me, it feels like it's the hidden secret that's not hidden. It's right in front of you. So if I would do one thing, one gift to give yourself is to see how present I can be That's what I want for every woman, is to be able to be so present that they can know exactly what they want, know how to ask for it, and then be open to receiving it.
Yeah. I'd love to build on this challenge to make it a little bit more concrete, which is I love the inquiry about, seeing how much presence we can bring. But then I would love for myself and others to then start to make a list about when we are more present, what are we in touch with wanting? And to share that.
That's beautiful.
I'm excited. I'm writing that down. Excited to explore that. Well, thank you, Elena, so much for this incredible conversation. I love to close out with acknowledgments or takeaways. So I'm going to share a few of the things that I'm taking from our conversation, and then I'd love to hear what has come up for you, what you're leaving with. So this theme around permission to be where we are and really leaning into presence is a huge takeaway for me. The power of getting in touch with and speaking and naming our desires and what we really want. I think for sure being in a mode of inquiry and curiosity instead of assumption. And then an awareness about my own body and being in my body, connecting to my body, moving in my body, the awareness of the heart, gut, and brain and alignment there. So all of these things are going to bring, I think, just more presence and curiosity even to my day today, and certainly into my parenting as well. Thank you for all of those gifts.
Thank you so much. And I want to acknowledge you for the whole idea of living an epic life. Really got me to reflect on the fact that I feel like I am living my epic life, and what that means to me was such a gift for me to reflect on and to remind myself that, it's really for me anyway, it is in the now, and that it informs so much of how I live and how I work. So I really want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you for, you have a real gift for reflection. And in the moment, just kind of picking out the juicy bits and reflecting them back. And I think that is a very powerful skill set. So I totally see that in you and acknowledge you, and can see exactly why this podcast is so needed and so fun to listen to and just really beautiful. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Feels so good to be seen. So right back at you. Well, I look forward to what's coming next. More juiciness with you, Elena, and we'll get that Zoom call set up. And I know that there will be many people interested in deepening that part of our conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about the Mother's Quest community, head over to mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review, and help us spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day. Love your people. Honor your gifts. Until next time.